Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine and you are listening to Faithfully Uncool, my little corner of the internet where I talk about Christianity, spirituality, and life. I often find myself overthinking, overanalyzing, or nerding out about my faith, so I figured I may as well do what all good nerds do and make a podcast. No matter where you are on your spiritual journey, I'm happy you're here and hope you learn something new for the road. So, before jumping into today's episode, I thought it'd be interesting to introduce a segment that I've been meaning to do. I enjoy hearing this from other podcasters, and that's just a quick life update, highs and lows of what's going on. So, this is my August episode. I'm trying to make these episodes a little more consistent, and at the time of recording, we're in the last week of August, so I thought I'd just open with some quick highs and lows. 2 highs, 2 lows, and we'll do the highs first. So one major high is that I have a new job, which is very, very exciting. And this is kind of a twofold high because the first part is that I have a new job, which is really cool and a huge accomplishment in of itself. I'm very proud of myself. It's been a journey and I'm excited about it. But the second part of it is that I was assigned a major project at that job to kind of help them plan their annual conference. And so just really had to hit the ground running, learned a lot about the team that I work on, as well as other teams that work with us. And so it's just been an eye-opening learning, but also sort of stressful experience in some ways. And so I've truly enjoyed it. Second high is that I visited New York City and walked the Brooklyn Bridge for the first time. If you're curious about any photos, if you like seeing travel photos, I've actually added some to the faithfully uncool _ podcast Instagram. So definitely encourage you to follow me there. Again, that's at faithfully uncool _ podcast. Had a really great time in New York City. 2 lows. Number 1 is not really that serious, and it's the fact that the show This Is Us is over. Now, at this point, it's ended a couple months ago, but still, that show just hits me right in the feels. The writing is superb, and I love talking to people about This Is Us. So it's just a quick plug to say that if you're a big This Is Us fan, you can hit me up in the DMs, comment on things that have nothing to do with This Is Us, and I will talk to you. The second low is that, unfortunately, as I get used to my new job and also just go through different things this month, this has kind of been a weird month for me mentally and emotionally. And if you've ever experienced anxiety or depression, you probably have a bit of an idea of what I mean. But I think that this week was just a week for me where I learned, that sometimes even when we leave a position, like let's say you left one job to go to another job, whatever the case might be, you can bring habits that you had at that old place into your new environment, whether that's relationship, job, whether it's metaphorical or literal. Sometimes we bring our old habits into our new blessings. And I think that this month has just been a reminder to me that I have to cultivate balance in my life and that it's okay to talk to someone, such as therapy or anything else, if I am sensing that I'm out of balance or things that I thought that maybe I had gotten better at or had moved past are starting to trigger or upset me or, come up again. So this has just been like a weird mental, emotional health space month for me. And it's kind of my signal personally that I might want to reach back out to therapy because I've just had a really great therapist in the past. But yeah, I think that it's helpful to be open about that because when we sense physical pain, we go see someone. And I think that it's good for us to honor our mental health care in the same way. And that mental health care and physical health care as well, honestly, should be much more accessible. So I am grateful that I can prioritize it. And it's not a low in the sense that I'm upset about it or, my gosh, I can't believe it. It's just more like, it's not something I rejoice over, but it is what it is. And so it's more of a neutral, but it just goes in this category. So anywho, those don't have anything directly to do with the episode, but I just thought that they might be a little bit more interesting, help you get to know me a little bit better as we go through the Faithfully Uncool podcast. And with that being said, I'm so excited to get started. So let's get into it. Today, we're talking about some important practices/life lessons I've learned that help my faith. Disclaimer, given the title of the episode, all of these things do not make me a progressive Christian. Even if you're from a more fundamentalist/evangelical background, then these practices may have a place in your faith. Hence the title of today's episode of Traditional Things That I Do as a Progressive Christian. This episode is more to show how my faith personally has developed over time since deconstructing. And if the term deconstruction sounds really weird to you, then just check out episode 1. By the way, speaking of terms, if you don't like using quote-unquote progressive Christian, then I encourage you to think about a phrase I heard from Pete Enns from the Bible for Normal People podcast called adaptive Christianity, which I love, since really progressing is a form of adapting in our faith that has honestly always happened in Christian history. I found this idea really interesting and encourage you to consider it if the term progressive Christian sounds too divisive for you or carries too much weight, what have you. Anyways, today, whatever you want to call it, I'm expressing how my faith has adapted or developed thus far in my life and how that's looked for me. So here we go. Number 1 is something that I'm pretty sure most Christians do, regardless of any kind of label you might want to hold on to, but it's a simple one yet important one to mention, and that's attending church regularly. There seems to be this debate sometimes, and people make a good point, honestly, of how church isn't the building, but the people inside of it. Church is community, and I totally agree. But I also think that if someone has gone through a period of pain in their church home or associated church with the place you feel most judged, out of place, or lacking in belonging, then it can be hard to believe in a positive worship space. But I still believe that many churches do a world of good and can be very helpful to attend. So even in my times of most questioning, when I felt like calling myself a Christian was a weird spiritual imposter syndrome because I was facing a lot of doubt and needed a space to air them out, I still yearned for a church home that felt open and safe and where I felt comfortable. I still valued the understanding that my personal walk with Christ needed to involve other people, even if I felt reluctant or hesitant in that walk. So church has remained an incredibly important aspect of my life, even more so, honestly, since deconstructing my faith. Number 2 is tithing. It's weird. I've heard a lot of talk about tithing, or at least enough here and there over the years. Should it be done? How much the percentage? Different understandings of how it's discussed in the Bible and the context. I understand it's definitely not the most controversial issue, but it comes up occasionally. And I find it all interesting, truthfully. But to me, tithing is an essential part of being an active member of a church. That simple. It's just not something that I get super deep with. Maybe other people do, and I will not pretend to be some biblical scholar that knows exactly which passages to point to about tithing and everything that they imply and all of that, but honestly, it just makes sense to me, and this is actually why I think choosing a church is such an important decision in a Christian's life. I grew up seeing my parents tithe. It just is a part of what it means to be a church member to me. And I even heard one pastor compare choosing a church to choosing a university. And to an extent, I do agree. We put a lot of thought into where we go to school. Does it have our major? Are there clubs I can join? What's the vibe on campus? How much does it cost? And on and on. And so we have a list of top schools where we understand we have to pay to attend. Churches, while definitely not a direct pay-to-attend setup, that'd be a huge problem, are still a vital part of a life. After all, you're choosing to go, you'll likely be asked to contribute monetarily, and it can shape your spiritual and social life for the better or worse. So yeah, choosing carefully is to be encouraged. And this is why I try to choose my church so intentionally, because I will tithe, and I'll be very open with my contributions. I'll raise them if the church discloses an issue. I will commit to it. Therefore, it matters a lot to me what that church stands for, who it welcomes. Is it dedicated to being inclusive, or am I hearing more about who doesn't belong? Is the mission statement on the website wishy-washy, or is it clear what their goals are? Are there actual opportunities for community and interaction, or have small groups just become a thing of the past? What's the leadership like, and who do I see represented? If possible to find out, what do people in the community seem to think about the church? Does it have a good reputation in the neighborhood? I feel like people review everything now, and I've definitely seen people negatively review churches on Google and stuff, and I'm not saying that that's like the end all be all. Explore places, give them a chance, give people a chance. But your church should be something that people in the community feel welcome to. It's out in the community, it's involved in the community and what it needs. And now listen, no church is perfect. And I also think you have to be mindful that you can bring a change to a church that they need. So get creative if you want to see something that's not there. Hopefully, nothing's stopping you from starting the Bible group you want or hosting a coffee hour. But at the same time, churches do tend to expect and honestly need tithes. And to be honest, I think that that's fair. We give a lot of money to things that definitely don't have the same impact on us as churches might. We give to YouTubers that we really like, to podcasters that we really like with Patreons and things like that. I think that it's just a way to recognize that being a help and a benefit sometimes requires money, often requires money. And I don't think there's anything wrong with giving your money to something that you truly support and that aligns with your values, your ethic, and, a community that you want to be a part of and that you want to be able to bless other people through, such as a church. So I think that it's completely reasonable and fair and a part of being a honorable and active church member. So in that case, I treat it like any other monetary investment, wisely, and I vet my churches and I think hard about where I want to commit to being a member, because I do approach it as something that I will give financially to. Which leads me to number 3, living below my means. Now, you might be wondering, living below your means isn't really a spiritual thing, and I get it, that's true. But I do believe that it's just reasonably sound financial advice, which you totally don't need to see that way because I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not claiming that it's financial advice, but I do know that I've heard that it's a good practice. So just putting it out there because, I'm not a financial podcast and I want to legally cover myself that you do you. But as far as I know, and I have on good authority, I believe that it's a good idea to live below your means as much as possible. Now, that's not to say that I never splurge. I feel like I have very fine and luxurious tastes in certain things. And I know we all have, maybe not all of us, but I think a lot of us have like those one or two things. Maybe it's shoes or it's bags or it's paintings or it's home decor, whatever, that you just kind of get sucked into wanting to spoil yourself with. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing or even a sinful thing. I don't get that serious about it. But I do think that you want to keep your finances within reason, and that can be a spiritual practice. Again, it's not that I never splurge. It's just that I recognize that my financial abundance, if I have financial abundance, I recognize it as a blessing and try to steward it well. I pray over it and I try to give openly to others, such as my church, like I mentioned before, as I'm able to. It also helps me not to worry so much about my future. So trying to release that anxiety that can surround money that I really don't like. So one day I woke up and in my positive affirmations to myself, I just said, you have more than enough. You have more than enough. And I just kind of meditated on that phrase because I felt like I just needed to calm down. Like I'm someone who likes a lot of control and likes everything to be very predictable. And it's not that money cannot be that way. Money can be that way. But at the same time, I sometimes get in my head about, oh my gosh, like, do I have enough? Do I have enough? And I get into what some people have called that scarcity mindset unnecessarily. And so thankfully, when I'm careful of not overspending or retail therapy habits, I do actually have enough. Although I didn't grow up wealthy at all, and I'm not wealthy at all by any means now, I also didn't grow up deprived. But a primary reason for that was the quote, "it takes a village to raise a child" mentality was really strong in my family. I had older siblings, aunts, and grandparents who would step in when my parents couldn't. I'm the youngest of 4 and honestly reaped the privilege of having a lot of people older than me in different stages of life who could help out as needed. And I'm extremely grateful because this helped me witness the importance of selfless giving and not having a scarcity mentality with money. Of course, there are true financial crises and poverty that must be addressed. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about more lifestyle choices that hinder us from prosperity. Treating my finances as a blessing, as a gift from God, as a good thing, as something that I need to treat responsibly has been helpful for me and gaining that discipline of just being a better person and having a better approach to my finances. Now, again, this doesn't have to be within a spiritual context at all. A lot of the best financial advice I've learned from YouTube and other podcasters and Instagram and all of this stuff are coming from very non-spiritual contexts. But in my life, spirituality does inform my financial habits. And so I just wanted to mention it here that it's just a part of that practice of disciplining myself into what I spend my money on and how I, as I heard one person call it, assign my money a job. This is one of the best pieces of sort of financial tricks or tools that I've heard is to give your money a job. So X amount of money has a job of paying this bill. X amount of money has a job of being saved. X amount of money has a job of, I don't know, going to groceries, right? Like it's a good habit to get into, as you're getting paid or as you're figuring out where you want your money to go. And so I think that my faith just kind of informs the jobs that I give to my money. So I felt like it was worth mentioning because while it is a financial practice, it's also a spiritual practice and it's something that shapes me. So moving away from finances here and onto a totally different thing, and that's number 4, food. Okay. Saying grace over my food even in public. Sometimes it's a challenge to do it in public because I'm that person who doesn't like to make other people uncomfortable when I'm eating with friends and stuff. But I usually ask people like, "Hey, would it make you would it make you uncomfortable if I said grace?" And usually people are like, "No, go ahead," But that's just the thing that I do. But I know that this is very small. However, this has a huge meaning to me. So, real talk here. I grew up in a Christian home, and while it wasn't super strict, we did do the basics, okay? So, praying over my food, saying grace is something I've done since I could talk. But I grew up saying the same prayer every night over food, and so it was just sort of a routine. Like you say the Pledge of Allegiance in school in America, or singing a song for chorus class. You just stop listening to the lyrics. The words just sort of flow out, no particular intention behind them, and it's nice, but you know what's nicer? The meal that you're saying it for. So there you go. But weirdly enough, I actually made a new prayer to say grace before eating my food my sophomore year of college. I was just in this sort of transformative space my sophomore year of college. I don't know if any of you have those years or those moments or those months, those seasons that you look back on in your life and you're just like, that was a moment, a year, a season that was so transformational, transitional for me. And it just made an impact in so many ways. And for me, one of those times is my sophomore year of college. I had drifted away from Christianity and going to church completely in my teenage years before that. So as a sophomore, I was like 19, maybe 20, like early 20s. And so prior to that, I had totally drifted away from my faith and the church. So if you caught me in church during my teenage years in high school, it was really a favor to my parents. But in college, I eventually came back to my faith and renewed it. My freshman year was full of doubts and reading a ton of stuff and tears and just all around wondering who I was, what I truly believed, and why I believed it. My freshman year was also very lonely for me. So I had this tug on my heart for Christ, but I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go back to my faith, if I had strong reasons for going back to my faith. Could I explain sort of intellectually, emotionally, I guess, why I wanted to be a Christian? I was just like in this kind of moment of like existential crisis, I guess, of growing up that sort of hit me as a young teenager and was kind of coming up again as I entered college. And it turns out that I would return to my faith. It was a new beginning for me, but it was also a different me returning. It was just this pivotal moment of how do I want to be a Christian? What does that look like beyond childhood for me? That was, when I look back at that, that was really the overarching question is how do I do this as an adult, as someone who makes my own terms, has my own mind? How am I a Christian in my own right as an adult? And so sophomore year sticks out to me as that bona fide, this is me, cue the music because we're dancing in the street, hallway, or other inconvenient place where musical numbers happen moment of aha, deepness with my faith and how connected I felt to God. So I was really prioritizing my prayer life, meditating, and while I had hard times, I actually had some medical issues going on that year that really marked my fall semester, and I was in the doctor's offices a lot, and it was kind of crappy, honestly. But that year sticks out to me not only because of certain medical stuff going on, but because my relationship with God got really real because it just was really honest. And so it was this turning point because I'd struggled in the past, I'd questioned in the past, and sophomore year I arrived at this place of, okay, God, I'm here, I'm listening. But before, I was doing it everyone else's way. I told myself doubt wasn't allowed and faith and intellect couldn't coexist. But that's not me. I've grown up now. So we're doing this my way. We're doing this in the way that's makes sense to me. Like Abraham asking God about the righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 18. I'm wondering how merciful you are. Like Hagar in the wilderness in Genesis 16. I'm wondering if this is the God who sees me, even as I'm still figuring myself out. And so, yeah, I know I'm making that dramatic. You guys are like, oh my gosh, all this girl's talking about saying grace. Like, get over it. And I know saying grace is a simple task, and it's one we don't always give a lot of thought to. But that was a moment in this simple 3-second prayer before I stuffed my face that I made my faith intentional in a way it hadn't been before. It was just this, like, it's the little things, and I sort of renewed and pressed reset on my faith, and this is just one of the ways that I did it. So it was this way that I returned to God and said, all right, I guess you really matter, and I'm coming along. So I prayed, dear Lord, thank you for this meal I'm about to receive. Please be with those who are not eating in their circumstances. Please bless those who made this meal possible. May it nourish our bodies and strengthen our minds. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's dig into number 5. Number 5 is humility. I truly feel that I have grown in humility since deconstructing my faith and growing up in my faith. No one owes you anything. It sucks, but it's true. Now, I'm not sure if my sister is listening, but I honestly think having a big sister is a total cheat code to life. So, Natasha, if you're out there, know that I love you bunches, as our mother would say. And to everyone else, if you don't have a big sister, get one. Weird flex, but I promise you 10 out of 10 would recommend. And of all the big sister lessons my sister told me as a young teenager, 2 stick out the most to this day. Number 1, no one owes you anything. And number 2, a lesson that helped me in the height of my teen angst and frustration. Mom and dad are parents, but they're people first. And while that second one is an absolute banger, number 5 focuses on the first. So no one owing me anything has shaped a lot of my outlook and expectations in life. It's helped me, I hope, in keeping an entitled attitude at bay, which can be pretty rampant in our society, but it's also helped me to have a sense of humility that's just helpful for Christians. No, we don't know everything. No, everyone does not see the Bible the way you, your culture, and neighborhood do. Humility helps me to be proud of my successes, but not defined by them. It helps me to understand that if people don't owe me much, then to be grateful for what I receive. That everything I've been given wasn't necessarily owed to me, so my attitude and actions should reflect thankfulness. And when they don't, I need to repent. Respect is needed, of course. This isn't an excuse to accept toxic behavior or people into your life, but it's a reminder that sometimes life throws us curveballs. In Romans 12:18, Paul writes, "If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." That's the NIV version. And I love this. I love that as far as it depends on you, because I think that it's so important for us to recognize that peace is the goal. Being able to be reconciled and at peace with everyone is the goal, as much as we can control that. So people will sometimes act in terrible, horrific ways. Our world will be and is harsh and unfair. But dare yourself to show up your best self anyway. Thank God for sisters. Well, that brings us to the end of our time together, and I hope you enjoyed it. I've noticed that sometimes certain practices come up as things progressives don't do, or this idea that since progressive Christian spaces are typically open to questioning, doubting, or even dismantling harmful theologies, there can be an assumption that one who calls themselves a, quote, progressive is a Christian who somehow doesn't take their faith seriously, or tries to dodge hard practices or accountability. And it's quite the opposite, or someone who rejects all stereotypically traditional or fundamental practices or thoughts without discernment. So today, I challenge myself to recognize ways my faith actually got much deeper after I became a progressive Christian or adaptive Christian, whichever label suits your fancy. And some of these ways may have even reflected a more traditional viewpoint to you, which inspired the episode title, Living in Those Strict Binaries Isn't Always Feasible. So, to be quite honest, I believe labels are more for others than myself. Categorizing is how people find comfort, and I get it, me too. But between me and God, though, I'm trying to draw closer to Him, and this is how. In the words of a young prophet named Taylor Swift, call it what you want to. Thanks for listening, and as always, go in peace.